warm back up by the weekend, get back up into the 70s here in Clearwater Beach, Florida. So it's kind of strange, but it is December, I guess. Anyway, and there we go. I can see now that the video is working, and I'm a little early here, so I'm just going to kind of banter for a little bit in this pre-show before we officially start at 9 o'clock. I am looking for some more questions. Did not get, I think I only got technically one question from the audience before tonight's show. So if you have any questions you'd like to ask me, as long as it doesn't have to be true crime related or missing persons related, it could be, as long as it's PG and not too personal, I will do my best to try to answer the question. Susan and Jasmine and Indy and Heather and Marcy and Gail, thank you all for tuning in tonight. Miss Susan, all right. Miss Susan, I think you might be new. I don't recognize, sometimes I have a pretty good memory for a lot of the same names I see on Wednesday nights. Maybe you might be new. Paula, good to see you in here tonight. Thanks for tuning in. So it's 9 o'clock, so let's just get started with this. I was just saying how it's a little chilly here in Clearwater Beach, Florida. I was out there for about a half hour today doing some disc golf practice putting while I was taking a break from work, and my feet were a little chilly. So there's that. I hope everybody had a great Thanksgiving. I went over to my brother Brian's and his wife and one of her daughters and daughter's friends. We were all there, watched football all day. The food was spectacular. But the weirdest thing happened. I still woke up on Friday morning with my stomach growling, if you can believe it. I just don't know how that's possible, that I had like essentially second helpings of everything. And I had like 4 pieces of pumpkin pie. I know it's disgusting. I had several cans of like Coke or what was it? Ginger ale or something. And still the next morning I woke up and I was hungry. It's crazy. I just don't know what to tell you. But the food is spectacular. We had ham instead of turkey, which was fine by me. I'm more of a ham fan than a turkey fan anyway. So I hope everybody, for what you did wherever you are, was a good time as well. It was a good time to spend all day over there. I don't go over there to my brother's as much as I used to, because I used to bring my clothes over there to wash them. And I have my own washer and dryer now, so I don't get over there as much. Carol's asking me, last week you said you like hot tea. What kind of tea do you drink? There we go. Now, Carol, that is a strong question. I'm pretty open to any kinds of tea, Carol. I like green tea. Probably especially, like if I go to Starbucks, although I don't get hot tea there, if I go there, I get cold green tea with just a little bit of sweetener in it. But any kind of hot tea, I'm fairly open-minded to all different kinds of tea, and I do love tea. In fact, I'm sure that if I lived in a colder climate that I would drink hot tea more than I do. Really, these days, the only times I drink hot tea is when I'm sick, and I don't get sick very often. So there's that. Like, when I was up after my mother died, I spent essentially most of the winter up in Pennsylvania last year. Lots and lots and lots of hot tea. It was great. There you go. Indy asked me how many cases typically. I think you're maybe going to have to explain that question a little bit more, Indy. I want to answer it, but I think I need a more complete question. Hello, Full Metal and Sharon. I'm not going to Pennsylvania for the holidays. In fact, my brother just asked me that a couple days ago. I spent all last winter in Pennsylvania. That was plenty. My dad will be coming down here probably within the next few weeks, and he'll probably be here through February or something like that. Mandy says chilly in Orlando. I bet it is, Mandy. Hello, Fumetto, Miss. Okay, Miss Susan, you've been watching for a first time in the live chat. Well, welcome. Great. Carrie is hereish. Okay, Carrie. Mandy says it's like Chinese food. You're hungry an hour later. You know, I have to say, Mandy, that Chinese food, although I don't eat it very often, really does not have that effect on me. I think it maybe that I don't know. Maybe that's just a wives' tale or urban legend or something about Chinese food. For me, that's not usually the way it is. But mm-mm. um, Indy asked me how many cases am I working on at any given time. Great question. I'm going to come back to that, Indy. Mandy says ham is way better. That is true. I do like living in the South more than the North, absolutely, or in Las Vegas, which is kind of the South. Hello, Lisa and Savannah. Carol Green Tea, I love it. And Addicted, hello. And Paula, can we all meet your dad on a Wednesday night? I know we did that when he was here back in June, Paula. I am sure that when he is here, we will get him on maybe even a couple times. So, and I think he'll do that. I think he'll come on the program. So, I think I can make that happen. Indy, how many cases am I working on at any given time? I would say that first of all, I want you to understand it's not just me. I think that you got a good understanding of that last Friday with Cameron Remmer's case, where there were multiple people working on it. As far though as producing the programs, as far as, of course, I do the interviews, I arrange all the audio, all those things. Of course, Emily mostly gets in contact with people. Carrie and Heather are mainly with moderating the discussion group. Cherie, of course, handles moderating of this YouTube channel, but I also talk to her about a lot of issues regarding the program and people we should be talking to and things we should be doing. But me personally, when it comes to missing persons cases that are going to become episodes, I would say that I'm working on about 4 at a time. One that is coming out that Friday, one that's going to be coming out the next Friday, and then 2 others that are in the preliminary stages. I've already had those initial conversations. I've taken notes and I'm looking into things. I would say probably 4 at a time. It could be more than that, but it's rarely less than that. I think that's a pretty accurate answer. Cherie's going to disagree with me on Chinese food. Real shock there. Hello, Laura. Full Metal. I have a question, Ed. Do you have a favorite podcast or YouTube channel you really enjoy? That's a great question too. Thank you, Full Metal. I do. Here are some. I don't. The only podcast that I would say that I listen to, pretty often is the Steelers Depot podcast, which of course covers nothing but the Pittsburgh Steelers. That is a podcast that comes out Monday, Wednesday, Friday. And I, unless there is something, unless another true crime podcast has covered a case that we're going to cover, I really do not listen to other true crime podcasts. I think I've said this many times before. I don't mind saying it again. But when I have time when I'm not doing Unfound work, my first choice is not to dive into more true crime stuff. I think maybe some of you already know. I play disc golf. I was out Monday morning with my brother Brian. I will get away from missing persons cases and that as much as I can. So when it comes to true crime podcasts, really none. But I will listen to the Steelers Depot podcast, which is really, really good, high quality, because I am a Pittsburgh Steelers fan. that's about it. But even when I'm listening to that, I'm probably it's not like I sit there and listen to it. I'm doing many other things when I'm listening to it. As far as YouTube channel goes, that's something different. Here are some of the channels that I like. I like Beyond the Trailer, which is a channel that is nothing about reviewing of movies or reviewing of trailers. I think the woman that does that program is excellent, and I try to catch that up. I love watching Doug DeMuro's channel about cars. He does a fantastic job. Very, very popular. He gets like views in the millions. I like the Active Self Protection channel because I love learning about self defense and how to handle yourself in self defense situations and shootings and things like that. I'm a big fan of that channel. I'm a big fan of the Paul Harrell channel, which is like a gun channel. His last name is Harrell, but it's not really, gung ho guns or things. This guy's very sensible. I watch his channel, and I like the Blanco Lirio channel because he gets into plane crashes and commercial flight and stuff like that. And he also covers like some of the California fires that have happened over the past few years. Those are some of the channels that I will watch on YouTube. So there you go. Maybe you've heard of some of them or none of them. I don't know. But those are some of my favorites. Mandy, Savannah asks, Ed, is there a case of yours that has really stuck with me? Her name was Lacey. You interviewed her mother-in-law, Lacey Buenfil. That's right up the road from me, Savannah, up near Ocala, where I just was a few weeks ago for a disc golf tournament. Yes. And there has been some movement on that case since we covered it. She was declared deceased. And if you'll remember, maybe 4 months ago, some remains were found in that area. Of course, it was not Lacey, but it really put her disappearance back on the front burner. And yes, her mother-in-law, Cindy Fox, was the guest. Yeah. So, yeah, that's Lacey Buenfil, Savannah. To the program. Thank you for those questions. Really good ones. And please ask them. I will get Moonshine. Yes, cover your asp. That is right. Moonshine knows. That's right. Active self-protection, cover your asp. The Moonshine knows that channel. I think that John Correa is the host. He does a fantastic job. Got a lot of respect for him. The poll from the Cameron Remmer case. We're going to be talking a lot about Cameron's case tonight because of things that have happened since the episode came out. First of all, the poll. A large majority of the people in the discussion group decided that they have between a 75% and a 99% assuredness that, or certainty, that something can't happen to Cameron in the Fairmont Hotel. Okay? I think that the choices were 100%, 75% and up, 50% to 75%, 25% to 50%, under 25% and 0. And the most popular choice was 75% to 99%. I can't say that I'm really surprised by that. For the simple reason, now, of course, what does that mean? I think that anybody that listens to that episode, and this is not the way I planned it, I think that a lot of people who will listen to that episode will say, you know what, it does sound like something weird happened at the Fairmont. It does sound like, one guy, is blocking me when all I want to do is talk to him. There's the video. There's my conversation with David Bolton where he kind of blew me off, very quick conversation. I can see that. I think that is also a factor of, and we ran across this on our think tank on Sunday night, and actually Cherie and I had a discussion about it just one-on-one, is that I think the reason that many people will default to the Fairmont is simply because there's not a lot of evidence going in any other direction. I mean, it is certainly possible that Cameron left that Fairmont Hotel alive, walked down the street, and disappeared. certainly possible. Okay? I don't know how probable it is, but it's certainly possible. The problem is that I don't know how you talk about that theory with any solidness to it, except to just really, 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 really start guessing because you got nothing. If he walked off, I don't know what else you can say about that. In my experience after over 3 years, is that you, the listeners, if you're presented with either a theory where it's just circumstantial and a competing theory where it could be possible, but there's nothing that really says, most people are going to go for the circumstantial one. I think that's just human nature. I'm sure I do it myself. So I get why so many people picked this particular choice of 75% to 99%. Um, uh, you know, another point of view. I think that if these security guards, Steve and Dan, one hadn't blocked me, and the other, their names are going to come up here in a second for another reason. But had I been able to talk to them and they would have given me, if I asked them really, really tough questions like I did Steve Pankey, and they answered those questions believably and there were no inconsistencies or discrepancies between them, then of course it's not going to be 75% to 99%. It's still, people may still pick that. They may say, well, those guys could be lying and everything, but surely the percentage would not be as high as it is. I don't think that this particular choice would have been number one. So there's a lot of factors, I think, that go into people picking that particular choice. You're welcome, Full Metal. Savannah, howdy. Miss Susan, why did I get into true crime? I'll answer that a little bit later, Miss Susan, if I could. Hello, Bree. How are you doing tonight? So that was the poll answer. Of course, last week, let's move on to something else. Of course, last week was maybe an unusual YouTube show last week because there were a lot of updates on some of Unfound's cases. I talked about Devin Bond, Andrea Bowman, Austin Pivo, Teresa Butler. This week, I really don't have any updates on any of those cases. Whatever you have read regarding any of those cases is what I know. However, I will say that I saw that Kathy Turkanian said she was going to be doing an interview with Inside Edition regarding Andrea. So obviously, with Dennis Bowman being taken into custody for the murder of a woman in Virginia back in 1980, the profile of Andrea's disappearance has definitely been raised, and that's spectacular. But to my knowledge, there's been no movement in Andrea's, Austin's, Teresa's cases at all. And with Devin Bonds, I've still not talked to his mother, and I've not tried to contact her. However, I will say that I've not seen anything that takes me away from the idea that Devin committed suicide, although I've not seen anything publicly on that. It just has that feeling to me. So I don't have any really new developments on any cases, whereas last week I had quite a few. Speaking of that, though, the newsletter went out, and if you were on the newsletter list, you should have gotten it sometime Monday. And if you didn't, if you think you're on the list and you didn't, please check your spam folder. What happens sometimes is that I just don't go into Google, create it, and send it out. Google won't let you do that because I have so many people on the email list. So I have to use a third-party company called MailChimp. And what I've discovered is sometimes certain kinds of email accounts, when they sense that an email is coming from MailChimp or there's a marker on it that seems like it's a bulk email, which the newsletter is, many email programs will send that newsletter to your spam folder. Okay? So I'm going to keep saying that because people often say, I didn't get it. I know I'm on the list. I'll tell them. check your spam folder, and that's where it is. So if you think you're on the list, and you didn't get it, please check your spam folder. And that whether you have Gmail or Hotmail or Yahoo, or you're one of those old school people that still have AOL or whatever it is. Um, if you didn't get it, please check your spam folder. Now, in there, I did write quite a bit about many of these updates and probably offered my opinion on some of them. I think that's what I would call not any theories necessarily, but probably even more expansive than when I talked about like last week when I did get to talk about Andreas and Teresa and these things that have come up recently. So a lot of the newsletter and but it's probably even more. Also wrote about what's been going on. Of course, being that the newsletter comes out every month, I had a lot to write about regarding Canadian Texas with Sheriff Lewis resigning and all of that stuff. I wrote quite a bit about that in the newsletter too. If you know that you're not on the list, if you're new, if you're just finding Unfound for the first time, yes, I do have a newsletter. It's been going on for maybe a year and a half or something, and it comes out at the beginning of every month. If you'd like to be on the list, email me at unfoundpodcast@gmail.com, and I will get you on the list. And really, it's just like the newsletter's kind of a recap of what went on over the course of the month, and then I will also maybe write sometimes I get up on my soapbox a little bit. I think some of you know that who get the news. So that's what I do there. So if you'd like to be on the list, please let me know. Within the last week or something that not all of Unfound's episodes were on Spotify. I have to admit, I didn't know that. I have Spotify. I'm a subscriber to Spotify. But I do not go on there and automatically go to my own podcast. I go on there to listen to the music, and everybody knows what I listen to. But I had a Spotify subscriber tell me, you know what? There's only 100 episodes. Not all of the episodes are on Spotify. And I was very surprised to learn that. So the way that the program gets on Spotify in the first place is through Podomatic. So I told Podomatic, and they altered something in the settings for my podcast. And now you should know that every single episode that Unfound is done is on there. So, and I think I'm learning more and more how many people listen to it through Spotify. And I think that's an excellent choice because I know that the quality of the audio on Spotify is good. So if you listen to Unfound on Spotify, and maybe you haven't listened to a lot of the older episodes, they are now all on there. So there you go. Hello, Michelle. How are you doing tonight? Let me go back to this question. How did I get into true crime? Why did I get into true crime? Not how I did it, but why I did it. Why is certainly a deeper question than how. I continue to say it was a combination of a lot of things coming together, Miss Susan. First of all, I've always been interested in disappearances since I was a little kid, since the 1970s. Disappearances have always been a fascination to me. Not necessarily, I mean, Amelia Earhart, Jimmy Hoffa, pick it. Even just maybe some disappearances that, or like Flight 19, which of course flew out of Florida and disappeared. And there are even a lot of disappearances that most people don't even know about that I've kind of followed over the years. Ships that have disappeared, and it's always been a fascination to me. And then along with my understanding maybe of technology, and I have some experience in public speaking and writing scripts and things like that, Miss Susan, it just kind of came all together. Now, as far as doing interviews, that was something that I just had to learn on my own from the first one I did. I have before I started Unfound, I had zero experience ever interviewing anybody. I had been interviewed myself before for some of the things that I had done, but I had never conducted any interviews. And so on the job training, and I think that um, I'd like to think that my skills have improved since day one. In fact, I know that the times that I've reissued kind of like the Suzanne Lau episode that I release on the anniversary of Unfound every year, and then more recently when I replayed um, Gina Marie Boss's episode and listened to it again, I can certainly hear the difference between how I interviewed then, and how I interview now. I think I believe there's a considerable difference. In fact, I know just when I've had a chance to listen to some old episodes, or where I'm going, or when I'm going through transcripts for the books, that I go through it and I think, well, I think if I had to do it over again, I'd probably ask some more questions or rearrange how I, ask the questions. I can certainly see how I would do things differently had I been able to do those old interviews again. But that was something that I had to learn on my own. Otherwise, doing research and technology and writing scripts and everything, those are skills that I had in abundance before I started the program. The interview stuff, I had none. Elizabeth says, Ed, your episode on MH Flight 370 was phenomenal. Thank you. I think that is the most popular episode on YouTube. And I think it's phenomenal, Elizabeth, because of the guest, Jeff Wise. I mean, I interviewed him summer of 2017. Over 2 years later, he is still the number one expert on that disappearance. Still. Even though he has a contrary view to everybody else. And I've kept in contact. In fact, I wrote something for Jeff's blog, I don't know, 6 months ago, 8 months ago, something like that. And I was happy to do that for him. But it was phenomenal because Jeff is a phenomenal mind when it comes to Flight 370. I think that's why it's phenomenal. Thank you. Nikki, why did you decide to start Unfound? What tipped you over the edge from enjoying others' podcast shows to start your own? So glad you decided to do it because it's amazing for case families. Nikki, thank you. Gotta be honest, Nikki. When I started Unfound, I didn't even not know that the true crime. And I continue to say that how I got into doing Unfound is probably completely different from just about anybody else who has started a true crime podcast in, let's say, the last 5 years. I think most people within the last 5 years got started because they saw the success of Criminal. Was it Criminal? No, Serial. Sorry. The success of Serial, and said, you know what? I'd like to do that. I think that's why most people, like within the last 5 years, they got into it. I also think that's the reason why so many other podcasts sound like Serial. Whereas me, I've never listened to one episode of Serial, ever. Ever. I didn't even know that Serial existed until I started Unfound. I had only really listened to one true crime podcast before I started Unfound, and that was the the first 6 or 7 episodes of the Mara Murray podcast from in 2015. So I wouldn't say that it was just a bunch of things that came together, Nikki. Just timing on it, and most people know that I did another podcast before this one that was very different. You can't find it anywhere. I don't own those files, so I guess you're not going to be able to listen to them. Not mine. So what tipped me over the edge was not that I knew that there was this huge popular thing going on. I had no idea. No idea. I said, you know what? Probably covering missing persons case. I might have, like, in passing, known that the Vanished existed. I don't think I ever listened to one episode before I started Unfound. I just had an idea of what I wanted to do. I had an idea of, if I was listening to true crime podcasts and about disappearances, what would I want to hear? And that's how it came together. I did not rip off anybody else in putting Unfound together, and I think that's why it sounds so different. I think that's why the episodes are so long, and interviews aren't edited, and I don't speak in that very, very soothing NPR voice. I don't. That's just not what I do. Even though I know most other people do that. That's why, because I had no reference in starting Unfound. Elizabeth asks, what do you think about Dr. Sneha Phillip? Disappeared the day before 9/11. Have you heard of this case? Elizabeth, I'm very familiar with that disappearance case. What do I think happened? I'm not an expert on it. I got to tell you, Elizabeth, I think there's reason to believe that she did not die because of the towers collapsing. That's all I'll say. Once again, not an expert on it. Don't know any more than any of you know. I just don't think that that's just not the way that my mind goes in that case. Thank you, Savannah. I'm not going to keep reading all these compliments, but thank you. And thank you, Unique Nikki. Thanks. I love being unique. Thank you. Let's go to some of the fallout from the Remmer episode. You should know this, and I don't think it would be appropriate for me to get into the specifics of, because these people did not talk to me one on one. But one of the both the security guards were mentioned in the Cameron Repper episode. They weren't mentioned very much. I didn't spend a lot of time, we didn't spend a lot of time talking about them. All I did was tell you the facts. In Danny Inouye's case, Chris was able to get a hold of him. Dan told Chris he would talk to me. Dan never did talk to me. And within a week, he blocked me after I sent him a couple messages. I called him. I went back and checked my phone records. I called him no more than 4 times and left messages. Never got back to me. But somehow, and I know how he found out actually, but he found out that the episode came out, and I guess he listened to it, and he was not pleased. He did not contact me about it. He contacted Valerie about it, even though he had blown her off for the past 2 months. And now, after the episode comes out, now he wants to talk. But once again, he's still not contacted me, even though he knows my email, he knows my phone number. So he said a lot, but I'm just going to stick to the facts of what he said. The way he remembers it is that he does admit seeing Cameron that night. He does admit that he escorted Cameron out. He says that he spent approximately 5 minutes with Cameron and that it was uneventful. Okay, that is what he told Valerie. Okay, now I want you to know, I have no reason to doubt him or anything else. The problem with it is that information conflicts with information that Valerie's family had been told at the time they went up to San Francisco in late 2011. What they were told is that Cameron was obnoxious and had been running all over the hotel, and that security had to track him down. So as you can see, there is a difference in stories there. Between, on one hand, Cameron's running all over the place, The security guards had to run him down to get a hold of him. They didn't say there was any fight or anything like that. It's just it took some time. Whereas Dan is saying that it was uneventful. I think that those two things conflict. I don't know what the truth is. Certainly, they both can't be true. Maybe neither are true, but they both can't be true. But I've not had a chance to talk to Dan. I would certainly like a little bit more of the play-by-play of who called it in, how did he encounter Cameron, what did Cameron say, was Steve Cannon there, and we'll get to him in a second, on and on and on. I would ask the same technical questions that I asked Steve Pankey, for example. The same kinds of questions I ask all of my guests. Very technical questions about things. I don't want to leave any doubt out there. Do it to the best of my ability. But that is what Dan told Valerie. Now, he told Valerie some other things that have nothing to do with the program, particularly about me, but we're going to leave that out of this discussion. All I care about is the disappearance itself. But that is what Dan said. Once again, he says that yes, he did encounter Cameron that night, that it was uneventful. He did escort Cameron out of the hotel, and it took roughly 5 minutes. Did not say anything about the other guy who we believe was on duty that night, and his name is Steve Cannon. So let's talk about him. I have not had a chance to talk to him, but my assistant Cherie, of course, Cherie in blue right here, did. She found a good email for him, and she asked him about Cameron Remmer, and his response was, never heard of him, don't know who he is, I don't know anything. Whereas we know he was working at the Fairmont on that night that Cameron disappeared. Cherie, I think I can speak for her. Of course, she was asking some questions that I asked her to ask. I asked her to ask him, does he know Dan Inouye? Does he know Chris Andesides? And Cherie, maybe there was some other questions. He did not answer them. All he would say is, don't know Cameron Remmer, never heard of him, nothing. And in fact, I think Cherie might have even sent him a picture of Cameron, nothing. Steve says he knows nothing upon nothing upon nothing. But also would not answer questions about whether he knew these other people, that we know that these other people do know him. So, in Dan's case, it's Cameron Remmer, Elizabeth, last Friday's case. As far as Dan Inouye goes, is if that is the story, and that is the truth, I have no idea. I really, really have no idea why he did not ever get back to me. We could have cleared it up maybe in 20 minutes. Never got back to me. Instead, he blocked me. But that's his story. So I just wanted to, that's what happened. This is how things work. Two people who you can't find, that don't respond to you and everything. The episode comes out, and now they're ticked off. Or one of them's ticked off. Well, that's the way it works. That's the way it works. We gave them plenty of time to get back to us. They did it. But once again, we don't lie on Unfound. That's exactly what happened. Cherie is backing me up. Thank you, Cherie. I actually know what I'm talking about. Cherie is saying, indeed, sent him a pic, said he had never seen him, didn't answer any other questions. That's Steve Cannon. Carrie says, going back up here, if he wasn't being obnoxious and escorted out uneventful, why was he booted out? Carrie, that's a spectacular question. I don't know. I don't know. And as Cherie wants me to tell everybody, Dan blocked Cherie as well. In fact, I think he blocked her on maybe Friday evening, Saturday morning, Cherie, after you sent him the episode. We're just telling the truth. And I can tell you that although I have blocked people over the last 3+ years on Facebook for very good, I believe, I can tell you that I don't think that I've ever been blocked by somebody who I was trying to contact about a disappearance who may know information about that disappearance. I don't think that has ever happened until Cameron Remmer's case. Pretty sure. Pretty sure. I've covered 100 and, 50 some, maybe there's one other instance of that or two, but it is very, very rare. So Cherie's blocked as well. Indy, and I want you to remind something else. What Chris, who once again worked at the Fairmont, told me, he told me that Dan is a really good guy when his name came up. And I've tried to call Chris since the episode came out, and he's not gotten back to me yet. Indy, I think there's a good chance Cameron was alive when he left the hotel, but that doesn't explain why his cell phone wasn't used after 11 p.m. It certainly does not, Indy. B, I thought it was because he was a little over the top selling vape pens. Well, BA, that's certainly possible that the reason he's got kicked out. The problem is that I talked to Khalid, who encountered Cameron that evening, that night, in that bar. Khalid said that, of course, Cameron wanted to talk to him about marijuana or these pens or whatever else, and Khalid walked away. Khalid assured me, now whether he's telling the truth, I don't know, I wasn't there, but he says, I did not alert, he said, I saw Cameron doing nothing out of the ordinary, and I did not tell security that they should remove this guy. Those are Khalid's words. So if somebody did report Cameron, it was somebody else, and we don't know who that person is. Still don't. I'm not saying we won't ever find out. We just don't know that right now. Yes, Elizabeth. While my turn, send me questions. I will ask. Okay, Carrie, maybe next time. So there's that. Let's move on to this. Now, there was another guy who was mentioned a couple times regarding in Cameron's Remmer's disappearance, and that was Zach Berta, who was in business with Cameron, other people, and doing what they were doing in California. Now, you will find that he wrote a very long comment regarding it, but you should also know that mainly, and we can't forget about Lisa either, Cherie. Well, we haven't heard from Lisa yet. But Zach, mainly what he did was, it seems maybe that Valerie got some of the information regarding Cameron's business wrong. Zach wants to correct that stuff, fine by me. I don't know. It really doesn't have anything to do with the disappearance. However, I think that he did offer some pretty good insight because he had encountered Cameron before when Cameron had a manic episode. And in this episode, Zach says, Cameron kind of went off the grid for 3 days. And in that time, he did not use his cell phone. He was eventually tracked down. And where was he tracked down? He was found at his place. He wasn't out on the street anywhere, wasn't homeless, wasn't in jail, wasn't in a mental hospital or anything like that. He was found at home. Now, the other significant thing, though, is that when Zach says he and Brittany, of course, she was mentioned, when they found him, that he had been building, like, out of $2 bills and coins and things, he was making these buildings out of this stuff, these currency. And so when Zach heard in the episode that Cameron was in San Francisco, and while he was there, he was trying to find silver dollars, etc., it occurred to him that maybe, even though it might not have looked like it, that Cameron was having another manic episode because of the coin topic that came up during the interview and during my long summation afterwards. That occurred to Zach. So I thought that'd be important for all you to know. The other point, I asked And there was a conflict on what that was actually going in the pens, and I'm not going to get into that. But I also asked Zach, how exactly was Cameron going to be getting back to Southern California from San Francisco? Uh, he was under the impression that Cameron could have gotten on a flight with that stuff probably with no problem. However, he does admit that maybe instead it could have been driven or shipped. And we do know that the people dealing in drugs, whether it's marijuana or worse, do use UPS, Federal Express, the Postal Service, DHL, etc. for their businesses. So it's very possible that that could have happened as well. But, you know, you can read it for yourself. It's in the discussion group, what he has to say about that. And he doesn't seem to think that the travel issue it was a very big deal. But I think he also realizes there were no firm plans about Cameron coming back to California. There were no arrangements, no car rental arrangements, no flight plans, nothing. And he was supposed to be coming back the next day. So there's that. Was there anything else that Zach said? Made some corrections, talked about manic episode. You know, the question I have, and I did ask Zach this, but he really couldn't answer it, is that if Cameron was having a manic episode, would this cause him to be violent if somebody, once again, if he was being escorted out of the Fairmont in a manic episode, how would he react to that? Zach said he really has no idea. But in Zach's opinion, when he found out that Cameron disappeared, he thought that Cameron had a manic episode and ran off like he did before. But on the other hand, he didn't know a lot of the things that, of course, didn't come out until the episode came out regarding the Fairmont, the video, Lisa, Steve Cannon, Dan Inouye, and all that other stuff. Of course, Zach, pretty much nobody else except people in the Unfound Circle knew that until the episode came out. Zach also admitted, though, that Cameron was dealing with some people up in San Francisco, but Zach did not know these people. Some of the names that were mentioned in the episode were not people that he knew. Yeah, Lisa's butt douse story. I'm not inclined to believe that at all. But her identity, her total identity, her last name, her profession, etc. Cherie says, these were not super wealthy people. How is $30,000 worth of product going to move? That's certainly something you would know beforehand. You'd think you'd work that out beforehand, Cherie, but that is not. Everybody can read what Zach wrote, and I don't think that was the case. Addicted says there's no record of him calling her back, but some old hotels like the Fairmont have lobby phones. Addicted, once again, true. No proof of that. I agree with you. That is certainly a possibility. No proof of that. Certainly something. I don't know how you'd go about proving that, but it's certainly a good point. Jenical says, I'm dying to know who Lisa is. We can't do that, Jenical, because, here's the deal with that. I don't mind using the full names of Dan Inouye, Steve Cannon, because they worked at the Fairmont. They were in security, and there is documentation. There is somewhat proof. There are stories that, and of course, Dan is now admitting himself that he did encounter Cameron that night. On the other hand, despite how suspicious Lisa has acted, threatening lawsuits and everything, the fact is there's no proof that she was in the Fairmont that night. And the truth is, she is not responsible for security at the Fairmont. She's not responsible for anything that goes on there. So because of that, I've left more of her details out. And that's why. Now, it would be different if she was in Dan Inouye's spot, where Khalid told me, you know what? I saw him with this woman. Her name was Lisa. They were in the bar. I talked to both of them. That would be different. That would be different. But that's not what Khalid said. Khalid said that Cameron was by himself. Is Khalid telling the truth? That's up for you to decide. But that is why we've left Lisa's identity out of this. But surely everything that Valerie said about her and how Lisa reacted is true. Doesn't mean she knows anything about the disappearance. But I can tell you this: I would, I certainly would have I certainly would have liked her to just answer the questions if she is innocent. This comes back to Dan Inouye as well. If it's true that he just walked Cameron out and there was nothing to it, why did he block me? And if it's true that Lisa butt dialed and never saw Cameron that night and everything else, when the guy's own mother calls her or the police call her, why is she threatening a lawsuit? I don't get it. Just don't. So those are all the updates with Cameron's case. And I think that, I'm guessing there's going to be more regarding this case. Just because the episode came out does not mean we're going to stop doing what we do. Most importantly, I would still like to talk to Lisa if she's willing to talk. I have no idea if she knows whether this episode came out or not. I have no idea. I've not heard back from anybody telling me that she's found out about it. But I would certainly like to talk to her. Maybe she'll threaten me with a lawsuit too. And to which I will tell her that the truth is the defense to any defamation lawsuit. And we did not lie in the episode that we did. So there's that. But we'll keep working on it. I'm hoping that this will catch some San Francisco media people's attention and maybe they'll start looking into it. And I'm hoping that this new information, will get to the San Francisco Police Department. I'm certainly hoping that Ann McKenzie catches wind of it and she can contact me anytime. Elizabeth, thank you. Yes, Elizabeth, please read what Cherie just wrote. What do we always say? Nothing to hide nothing. Paul, the think tank is a great group to be part of, Elizabeth. Yes, it is. BA, Lisa, a cougar in a relationship. Well, it is true. She was a bit older than Cameron was at the time. Cherie says, the fact is no one is going to leave $30,000 in product unattended. If he was thrown out, I'm sure that's the first thing he would grab. Cherie, I agree with you. It's just I'm not sure if he was having a manic episode, would he even care about that? I just don't know. I'm not an expert in the field. Cherie, why don't you help Elizabeth out if you could? So that's really all I have on the agenda. Got some great questions tonight, but I do have another question that Charlene asked me through. That was the question I had coming into tonight. I'm not going to read everything that she said, but she's asking me, my question is, how do you wind down after hearing from families and friends and loved ones? I think what she's saying is how, all these conversations that you have are so sad. How do you disconnect from it? I think it's safe to say that I just don't get that emotional about these cases. That's really not my job. It's not. I feel for these people. I'm as genuine as a person can be with them. But they're not Unfound. They don't speak to me because they're looking for my sympathy. Okay, they get it, but that's not why they're talking to me. They're talking to me. They talk to Emily. They talk to Cherie. They do all of these things because they want help. And that's what we're trying to do. And so to help, in the way I think of it, is you have to keep a very objective mind. You have to keep a very rational, logical mind. And frankly, sometimes our emotions get in the way of those things. And um, I don't think what we do, we can allow our emotions to get in the way, because sometimes emotions are going to take you off this way and that way and that way. And you start feeling things instead of start thinking things. And you start not analyzing things maybe as closely as you should do, as you should. So I really don't wind down. I mean, I take time away from Unfound, but it's not because I have to. I'm not, I don't feel like it's I'm not a soldier who's been in Iraq or Afghanistan or somewhere else that, they need leave to unwind and maybe get some counseling, psychological counseling to protect against PTSD. And we know all the issues that our soldiers in the 21st century have with suicide, everything. I mean, what I'm doing is not like that. It's not like that. Those people are seeing things firsthand, seeing friends die and lose limbs and all of these things, and that's all serious. Of course, what we do here is serious as well, but psychologically, I'm not affected, I think, like those people are, and it's perfectly logical that they are affected like that. But that's not really what I'm doing. It's something different. And so I don't think psychologically, emotionally, I'm affected like that. I think, the time I take away from Unfound is not because I need to unwind, because I'm, stressed out, or I'm depressed because I'm doing these interviews or things. That's not the reason. I take time away from Unfound because any person who does any job takes time away from their job to do other things for a little while. I'm not doing it because I need to get away from it to save my mind or something. That's not in it at all. I do it because I also like to play disc golf. I do it because I like to go to the gym. I do it because I like to watch some baseball games and football games once in a while. I do it because there are other things to do. But still, Unfound is a 7-day a week endeavor for me. Pretty much, even when I go to disc golf tournaments, I play during the day, and then in the evening, I'm doing something with Unfound. I'm listening to a conversation, I'm taking notes, I'm looking into something, I'm planning out, what the next episode is going to be about. It's something that I do, every day, but sometimes it's 12 hours and some days it's 2 hours. So, all right, Carrie. Carrie's saying you have to take a break to prevent burnout. You know, Carrie. I would generally agree with you, but I think, I don't know if I've ever talked to any of my assistants about this. I think maybe I've talked about it on the show, but I've failed at so many things in my life. I mean, really, that to be able to do something that is enriching to both my life and other people's lives, there's no time to be burnt out. This is what I've been, this is the kind of thing I've been trying to aspire to my entire life. I didn't know it was going to be this, because I tried a lot of other things that I failed at. But there's no time to be burned out when this is what you wanted to do, and use my mind, use my experience and things to help people with their lives. There's no, like I said, um, you know, I'm I'm not going to fail at all these other things. Then finally, when I'm doing something that is really good and I'm doing it well and we're making progress and everything, that suddenly I say, well, now I have to start taking time out because I'm going to get burnt out. But but I know, I mean, Carrie, I agree with you. You know, there are people that do experience burnout in their jobs and everything. But like I said, I've tried so many different things and failed and everything that, trust me, failing at doing things is way worse. You know, has much more of a does much more damage to your psyche and your self confidence than ever thinking about getting burnout doing this. So that's the way I look at it. I think that I'm very fortunate to be in the position that I am in. And, you know, it's not like Unfound is the most popular podcast out there. It's not. In fact, I can't even tell you that it's even in, I haven't even been on iTunes for a very, very, very long time. I couldn't even tell you if it's in the top 200 podcasts in the news section on iTunes. I have no idea. I have no idea. But because that's not how I judge things. I don't even care. I don't read reviews. I don't look at rankings. Nothing. Because it's just not important. I mean, the things that we're trying to do aren't measured that way. They're measured whether people are getting thrown in jail or not. They're not measured by subscribers and listeners and downloads and reviews and everything else. I measure Unfound success by catching people, by remains being found, and even if Unfound might not have had anything to do with it, that's how I measure the success of the program. There is no other standard. So when it comes to getting burned out and those other things, it takes a lot of load off my mind because I don't have to think about things that I'm sure most other podcast hosts do think about. Where are they on the chart? How many downloads are they getting? Are their advertisers pleased? Those are things that never come to my mind ever. It's just different. Failing also gets you need to where you be. That Michelle, that has certainly been true for me. Thank you for signing up, Elizabeth. Michelle says the more you fail, the closer you get to your true passion. I suppose you're right. You know, unfortunately, it's also true that there are people who fail their whole entire lives. So that could be true. Thank you, Elizabeth. But so when it comes to burnout and getting back to this question is how do you wind down after hearing from families and friends and everything? It's just not part of my makeup. It's not because I'm a cold-hearted bastard. I'm not. But my guests and myself, we have a definite understanding that they come to me for help. They don't come to me because they want me to cry and things along with them. I have sympathy for them. And I try to assure them that what they're feeling is totally natural, and they shouldn't feel guilty about it. And that's true. But I'm supposed to be a problem solver. I'm not a psychiatrist. So there you go. Let's get to this Friday's case. And that is, we got, I don't know how many we've done. I know we did what? Colt Haynes and Molly Miller. We did Laura Bible and Ashley Freeman. We had Dallas Jansen Brewer and Daniel Braden. I think this is going to be the 4th episode that we've done. Maybe I'm off by... No, the McDaniel sisters, of course, we can't forget them. And then we had the 3 Canadian men who disappeared on that boating trip. So there's probably more than I thought now that I think about it. But we will be covering the disappearances of 2 people this Friday. The disappearances of Tammy Arthur and Chad Peters. It is a very, very new disappearance, just from November of last year. Of course, as you may know, on Unfound, we wait for a disappearance to be a year old before we will cover it. This just got right in there. They disappeared seemingly on November 7th of 2018, but even that date is in question. They were from Corpus Christi, Texas, but the last sighting of them, they were driving into Mexico on, once again, November 7th. This is an episode that I'm calling South of the Border because this is an episode where Mexico is going to be mentioned once again because that is seemingly where Tammy and Chad were going. You're going to hear, in fact, I will post it before the episode comes out. I'll probably post it tomorrow. You're going to hear about a phone call that Tammy made in which she claims that Chad got caught by a drug cartel in Mexico and stole all of their stuff, their cars, their money, their money, their passports, etc. Tammy made a call to somebody regarding that. You're going to hear about went on a cruise not long before they disappeared. However, they never showed anybody pictures. There's no proof they were ever on the cruise. Like the rest of us, we go on a cruise, we show people pictures. Everybody knows, look at us, look at us. They never sent any pictures to anybody. In addition, even though they disappeared on November 7th, Tammy never contacted her mother after October 30th. But Tammy's mother did talk to Chad once they got back from this alleged cruise. So there's a lot going on here. And I think there is reason to believe, happy as can be, we just don't know. There's no proof that they're dead. There's no proof that they're alive. There's no proof that they might have been smuggling drugs. There's no proof that they had anything to do with the cartel. Nothing. But I think there is circumstantial proof that some of the things that they were saying weren't the truth. What does that mean about regarding their disappearance? That'll be for you to figure out. Once again, this is the disappearance of Tammy Arthur and Chad Peters. They're from Corpus Christi, Texas, but they were last seen going into Mexico. They went into Mexico on November 7th, 2018, but there is proof that Tammy made a couple calls after that. And the guest for this episode is Tammy Arthur's mother, Roxana Regal. I did that interview yesterday. And the episode is being called South of the Border. So let me see what some of you... Corpus Christi, exactly 75 miles. Yep, it's another Texas case, or maybe it's a Mexico case, Cherie. South Texas, me too. Enjoying this live right now. Livingston, Texas is where Full Metal's from. Full Metal says I lived in Corpus Christi for a year. All right, well, it's another Texas case. We've covered a few in Texas, but I don't think that that's the state where we've covered the most disappearances. I think Florida, coincidentally, where I live, is the state in which we've covered the most disappearances, I think. Maybe California, that would make sense being it has the most people. So that's really all I have for tonight. What did we do? We talked about my Thanksgiving, and hope you had a great one. Talked about the Cameron Remmer poll. Talked about how Daniel Inouye got in contact with Cameron's mother finally. Talked about how Steve Cannon claims that he knows nothing about Cameron Remmer. Talked about what Zach Berta has written, a guy who knew Cameron. He wrote some very long comments that I think all of you should read in the discussion group. Really no new developments in Andrea Bowman's case or Austin Pivo's, Teresa Butler's. The newsletter came out this past Monday, and all of the episodes are now available on Spotify. I also took a lot of great questions from you, the listeners, or the viewers. And This Friday, we will be covering the disappearance of Tammy Arthur and Chad Peters. I've already put some links up in the discussion group and on the Unfound page for you to check out. So that's all I got. Thank you for listening, watching tonight, commenting, taking part. And you will hear me on Friday, and then you Unfound Think Tank members will be talking to me, and I'll be talking to you on Sunday night. Good night, everyone. Thank you so much for tuning in. One of my favorite times of the week. Thank you.